Okay, so we're live with the Node.js release workgroup meeting for the 3rd of December 2020. And we're going to start by following the agenda that's in issue 630 in the Node.js release repository. But just to start, are there any announcements anyone has to make before the start of this call? Nope. Okay, so I will go ahead and share my screen as the first items on the agenda are to go through the schedules for our various release lines. So I'll open up those now. I'm assuming you can see the screen.
Yeah, I can see it.
Cool. Okay, so for Node 15, we are scheduled up until the new year. So probably all good there. Yep. We'll check we haven't got any extra participants. Nope. Okay. I don't think we need to plan further ahead than that. Any thoughts? I don't know if we do need really. Nope. Okay. Node 14. This is one where I think just by the nature of having a security release last time and then having the LTS transition release, I think it's been about maybe at least 6 weeks since we've had like a feature full or a patch release of 14, like a generic patch release that's not security related. So I am hopeful. I've signed my name up. I'm hopeful to get one out in December sometime. My aim would be to try and get a proposal up this week, and then maybe we can agree on timings after that. But I do think it would be good to get one out kind of this side of the holidays.
Yeah, I think, do we still aim for a 2-week release calendar window for LTS releases? I mean, obviously we'll have to take Christmas into the sort of holidays into account.
I think we aim for it, but in this case, we've got regressions that people have been waiting for patches for like,
yeah, that's fair enough,
4+ weeks, and it seems like the trade-off of how much disruption we would cause by doing a release kind of a few days before the holidays, and making people wait longer versus just getting it out when we can, aim for as long a baking period as we can reasonably fit into the time we've got. It seems like a reasonable trade-off this time for me, but
fair enough.
You'll agree.
Have you had a chance to gauge how much of a gap there is between 14 and potential things that could land?
No, I'm still working through the backports. I've not run branch diff yet, but I actually anticipate it to be quite large.
Yeah, that's my worry.
The only thing is, because we're constrained for time, I thought let's go for a patch, not a minor. There might be a bunch of patches. Sorry, I might miss something there, Richard.
No, I just said no objections to going for a patch release over a minor.
Yeah, just because it seems like for a minor we probably would want a bit more time. So
yeah, that's fair enough.
Seems the most reasonable. So I'll just see where I can get to. Hopefully, aim is by the end of this week to have it open, and then we'll decide whether to do next week or the following week. Probably the following week, Tuesday.
Were the regressions in streams? Some of them were.
There was a regression in streams.
I think Matteo, was it? Someone has a PR to backport some of the internal reorganizations they did for streams?
Yep.
Because there is a big difference at the moment between streams in 14 and 15 and above, because files have been moved around.
So I landed that Matteo's used internal streams PR yesterday after getting a green CI on the staging branch, and there are some subsequent backports that were prior to that also touching streams. So I need to go in and figure out whether I can just cherry pick the 15 extra ask the person to patch the so that's the kind of hold up at the moment before I can run branch diff. But I think we're in a good state, and I'll just try to get possible.
Well, hopefully it will make backporting some of the stream stuff a bit easier.
Yeah. Then we've got a minor scheduled for January. January 5th seems ambitious, but I guess we'll leave it there if we have to push it out by a week or so. So be it.
Okay.
Okay, that's 14. I feel like planning too far ahead into the new year. Overwhelming for many people, so probably stick there. 12's now in maintenance, isn't it? So
it is. Was it you or someone who asked about whether we should split this table or reorder this table?
I did it for 14, so maybe we should do a similar thing. I hid all the current ones under a twisty just because it made it easier to read for me.
Fair enough.
But yeah, we could do that.
Because I can't remember what column I added. I added a column to this, but I can't remember which one. Or was it? Maybe it was 14. I can't remember.
Okay. So yeah, that will just be as and when we need. I don't think I've seen anything that requires a pressing release for 12.
No, I think I have seen a few backports opened recently.
Okay.
But nothing that seems pressing as far as I can recall.
Okay. I'll take a quick look after the call and just try and gauge whether there's something that we need to squeeze in this side of the year, or we can just leave it until.
I suppose the only thing is we don't have anyone from NPM here. There was a point patch release of NPM. I'm guessing since they haven't tried to PR it into Node directly that it's probably not urgent, but some of the dependency updates did mention security issues, so I'm guessing that there's a possibility there might be audit warnings or something. But I guess we'll need to consider that at some point, just bumping NPM up to the latest patch. But certainly nothing I've seen suggests that we need to do that urgently.
Yep. Okay, and I can guess that 10 is in a similar state. I don't think. I know you did a good roundup release a couple of months back.
So. Yeah, I don't believe there's anything outstanding that anyone's pushing for 10.
No. So probably good. So it's just the 15. So for 15, we're scheduled up until January. 14 scheduled up until for this year. So it's really, I think, the 15 and 14 releases on our to-do list.
Yeah.
Okay.
And especially 14, if as you said, there are regressions that should be updated, and we didn't do a release at all last month for 14, other than the security release.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Okay. I'll try and get some movement on that. And now back to the agenda. I did add the discussion. So I see Miles has just added there's a bunch of people in the Binary Summit. I think it's worth starting the discussion because I don't think we're gonna it's going to be a long running thing. So if we can start it and maybe get some action items kind of around what data we could collect, as Danielle mentioned, it's worth starting to dig into that, I think. So I guess I can have a go at introducing this. James opened a proposal to revamp the LTS schedule. It talks about the overlapping releases and having at the moment we have 4 release lines to maintain. And when you encounter security issues or issues across all release lines, it can be quite difficult to patch those, especially where the same patch might not apply to all of the release lines. And he gave a couple of approaches. One was to shorten the LTS time. This one shortened maintenance LTS to only 6 months. So this one, I believe, if I'm interpreting it correctly, would reduce our LTS, our total LTS time by how long?
Currently it's 30 months, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah. So by
Right.
about a year.
I think it's 12 and 18, and it's 12 inactive and 18 in maintenance. Is that right?
I'll pull up the.
Yeah.
This is one of those things where I really need to sit down and draw it out on a timeline. Draw it out.
We have written it down somewhere as policy. If you scroll down a bit, somewhere.
Oh, here.
Yeah, somewhere here. There we are. 12 months of active support, 18 months of maintenance.
So
It's the other way around in 12 and earlier, but yeah, at the moment it's 12 months of active maintenance and 18 maintenance. And James was proposing drastically cutting maintenance down from 18 to 6. So that's losing the entire year of support.
So if we looked at that in the context of, say, Node 12, Node 12 would be end of life in April.
Possibly, but I mean, I would argue that we can't. It would be.
I'm not suggesting that we change it for those. I'm just saying in the context of 12, can, like, if 12 was due to go out in April, would people be ready for that? I would say not.
Given that we've only just put 14 into LTS,
yeah.
So that would only give you what, six months to make the transition, which is depends on the company, I guess, and what you're doing, but it's not a lot of time.
One thing that would be useful, and I know we're working on it with Ash, is getting the download stats and trying to see what the uptake on 14 is as a proportion of the overall downloads at the moment, just to try and see whether is it still lingering behind 12 in terms of share, or is it surpassed that within 6 months. That would be interesting. It might help make the call.
Yeah. I don't know if Jordan has numbers for NVM as well, perhaps.
Might be worth asking. Daniel, you mentioned about numbers, and that you could get some your side.
Yeah, so I can pull numbers from Heroku. We do lock the version on our build packs at whatever the I guess the active LTS is. Right now, I still have it locked at 12. Just I think that was it just this week that 14 became active LTS. I don't know, but yeah, so it's still 12. It'll be 14 eventually. I think I'd like to pull those numbers before I switch it to 14, just to see like who. Just from the builds that we're running, who like how many of those actually switch to 14. That means that they're just using the default version, because there's different ways that people are using Heroku, spaces. They're running builds as well as running web servers. So there's like those factors to consider. But yeah, I can pull some numbers as to like what people are doing. We don't have a lot of, I would say that there aren't a lot of people that are using deprecated versions, but I definitely see them more often than you would think. That's mostly because you can just deploy code to Heroku and then let it run there forever and never touch it again. And it'll just, that specific version of the application that will just run forever. So there's not a huge advantage, I mean, from their perspective to upgrade.
Okay. Sure. So the numbers you could potentially pull the number of people using each kind of version as a proportion.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I can look at what they're using it for too.
Yeah, what would be interesting is pulling those numbers before the default is switched to 14 to see how many people are going out of their way to kind of use 14 at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of interesting. Cool. I'll hop back to the second suggestion, which is, I believe everything, even numbered majors would be guaranteed 12 months of support. And then every other even numbered major version would have our LTS support as we have it today. So it kind of means every other release would have 12 months, and the release in between would have the same as what we have now.
So I am not sure that would. So one of the things about this discussion is it's not actually clear what exactly is the problem that's aiming to be solved here. From what I've seen in terms of backporting, the issue we have with backporting to LTS isn't that we've got so many releases to support, although there is obviously some overhead in supporting each line we support. It's that the oldest release line we support has diverged significantly. So if we can typically patch, for example, right now, if we can patch node 10, node 12 is somewhere between 10 and current. So 12 would not be so difficult to maintain if we had a patch for 10 or a patch for current. 12 will be somewhere in the middle. And I don't see that some of these approaches, the second approach, we're always going to have the oldest release. So even if say the current scenario is 10 is still in the extended LTS of 30 months, but we weren't supporting 12, we would still have the overhead of having to backport fixes to an old code base, if that makes sense.
And you could maybe
just from my point of view, that I think is where the trouble is, which is we would like to have fixes on all lines, but the oldest release line we've got is the hardest one to backport a fix to, especially if there's been refactoring or significant changes in the meantime. So for this second option, yes, we would have less release lines to support, but we would still have the problem that we would still be supporting something that's up to 30 months, or not quite, maybe 29 months old, depending on where it is in its life cycle, and the gap between that and the current, which is the technical problem.
And you're going to have a gap of what, potentially three or more majors?
Yes.
So I would maybe even think that keeping that major in between, so in time 12 up to date, might help because
Yes.
granular path between the code bases rather than a massive jump between them. And then in the context of companies like enterprise companies that tend to just hop from LTS to LTS, I think that would make they're going to have a bigger jump. And for now, we kind of say, hey, it'd be a good idea to test against the odd versions of Node in between, just to test your migration path. But saying to someone, oh, you're going to have to test these two versions in between the next LTS for your migration path, I don't know who would go to that expense, to be honest. I think people would just try to hop LTS to LTS again, but now their hop's going to be even bigger. So I think it would make migration a bit more complex.
Yeah, I at least from what I've seen, there's quite a few companies out there that only migrate when they absolutely have to. So although we have recommended testing on current, in the meantime, I still see a lot of companies only considering jumping from one LTS release to the next, and typically only when the next LTS releases actually get active, rather than not even when it's concurrent.
Yeah, I guess I'll quickly skim through. Option 3 was a radical move away from the current release model, which was we have a canary track which has all changes landing in the main dev branch with a release every few weeks. Fast track, stable and selected experimental changes, graduating within a month, after a month. And a slow track, verified stable changes. graduating from the fast track.
Yeah, the thing that concerns me with that though is if we're only doing releases twice a year, that's probably going to be too, large, difficult to do releases because of the amount of stuff that would have to go into them.
Yeah,
I think part of the problem we've had over the last year, but maybe a bit more than that, is that one of the reasons we expanded the pool of releases was that we were finding it difficult to schedule releases, which meant that releases started slipping, and it meant that the technical debt for each release got bigger and bigger, which made it harder then to do those releases because it just meant more things to shift through in terms of evaluating the backports and content. So I'm a bit reluctant to have larger, more spaced out releases.
Chances are that the slow track would require more than twice a year release anyway, because chances are some subtle bug's going to be found and we're going to have to get in there somehow.
Yeah.
And security releases will apply to those as well. So when I look at these three options on the surface, the one to me that I would prefer if I had to choose between them would be 2, only because when explaining the Node.js release cycle, people, it's not easy as it is. It's not 100% clear, but at least like the odd even is, I think that's the closest thing to having something we can reasonably explain, like saying, oh, every other even release is LTS in a sentence, just to help people. I think the other 2 would make explaining what we do a lot more complex, and therefore people would struggle to understand what to use when a little bit more. But even so, I don't follow the same what's the problem here and this is the solution. Like I would be more interested in whether we can see the problem statement in detail and we can maybe figure out other things aside from the LTS schedule maybe that would help.
Yeah, because all this says is there's an ongoing maintenance burden, especially when we encounter security issues. But from what I've seen, it's not been the number of branches we have, but the actual technical difficulty of taking something from current and taking it as far back as 10. But maybe maybe James has some other ideas, but definitely, as far as I can see, I don't see the problem he's stating tallying up with the solutions being proposed. And the other data point I've had is that we do have an established LTS policy, but I am aware that there's quite a few enterprise products and things that use Node where the feeling is that our current LTS periods are actually shorter than they would like. So I don't think we actually have to, we don't have a particular want to extend the LTS periods right at this moment, but in terms of what should we be doing versus what we can be doing, I think going for shorter LTS periods would meet with some disappointment / resistance.
Yeah, and I think you raised somewhere in this issue as well. We only made the switch for the maintenance and active timeframes.
For 14, so 12 was 18 months followed by 12, and then 14 is 12 months followed by 18, I think. Or is it no 12? Sorry, 12 was the first that was 12 months followed by 18. So 12 is the first release we've done, which has had a longer maintenance period but a shorter active period.
I guess it would be good to keep an eye on whether that makes security patches or other patches even more difficult, because I think that could happen potentially if we're not regularly pulling back patches, because it's the delta could get larger, so it is something to keep an eye on. But yeah, I feel like from this discussion, kind of introducing it, the takeaways I would have is let's try and figure out the problem statement a bit more, and also try and get data of usage across versions as they are today. So we can kind of gauge whether people are on 14, so they upgrade quickly, or they're still on 10 and 12, so they leave it for, like, to later time to upgrade.
Yeah,
I think that information would be crucial.
indeed. And I don't know if there is a particular difference between the regular releases that we're doing and the security releases, which are unique in that there's a much smaller pool of people that look at security releases for obvious sort of confidentiality reasons. And maybe part of the problem is the availability of people to actually look at those issues, you know, being more restricted. So again, this comes back to the what is the actual problem that's trying to be solved here.
Yeah, maybe some particular instances of when a patch has been particularly difficult to apply, because I have kind of a feeling that there were some parts of the code base still in 10 that tend to be the source of kind of conflicts and friction that might go away when 10 goes,
Yes.
because there are some things completely dropped as of Node 12. They're not there anymore, and from what I've seen, I feel like that could be responsible. So maybe when 10 goes, the problem lessens because the delta in major dependencies or subsystems is smaller.
Yeah, agreed. And 10 is only until April, so after April it's gone. So it may be a very short-term problem that just goes away.
The other thing is, from a kind of LTS release hat, I think if we were going to make any of these changes, making them at least by January, February, because if we're going to make the changes for Node 16, I feel like we should try to at least make that decision before 16 is released.
Yes, agreed.
For clarity.
Yeah. So my position would be I would not want to make any changes to the existing releases that are out there at the moment. I am open to trialing a different approach for Node 16, but I don't want to do that just because I would like that to be you know, we have reasonable confidence that we know why we've made some changes for 16. And this is why, rather than some speculative adjustment, because I'm not opposed to moving the plans around, but we have tried to have plans and I don't think we've really kept to any of them. We probably have, but we've been fiddling around with sort of maintenance periods and pushing out dates and things. So it would be good if we only did that in exceptional circumstances and not as the norm.
I would be interested in seeing who implements these, I guess, different release plans. Maybe probably other JavaScript projects like Angular or Ember, because you probably have some of the same users. There's probably an overlap there, but and maybe seeing like how quickly they see people actually adapting to the upgrades, or if their user bases say, oh, this is too fast or this is too slow or whatever. I think this is kind of missing also from that proposal is some examples to draw from, because we could also get data from that as well.
Yeah, definitely. And we should bear some of these projects in mind as well while making this decision, because their hands may be tied by the decisions we make with our LTS policy.
Right.
And one thing about that second option about only having every other release effectively be an LTS is that would probably be not suited to those people that want to try newer JavaScript features but only want to do it in an LTS release. So for example, we had all that stuff with the ES modules, and the reason that was backported to 12 was the argument was that there was the argument was to try and get a greater adoption amongst people in an LTS release rather than limiting it to current at the time. And if we were only doing every other release as an LTS release, that would just be an even bigger gap between when a feature appears in current and actually ending up in an LTS release.
Yeah. Okay. I can write some of this up in the minutes after the meeting. So I think going back, asking what the problem, if we can clarify a problem statement, maybe with some examples of particular patches that have been a particular burden. It should be okay to share those because we're just talking about previous releases and previous security releases where the patches are already out there. Try and figure out what data would be useful from the Node.js side as well as external like Heroku, and maybe investigate some modules and LTS policies. Maybe it's something that I can raise on the package maintenance call. It's probably worth a quick discussion over there. There's a few module maintainers on that call to see what their thoughts are. Just point them at the discussion.
Okay.
One other thing that I thought might be useful is we've got the schedule generator thing that outputs this SVG.
Yep.
I might have a play and like try and generate one with some of these numbers in.
Okay.
Because being able to see the overlap like visually, that might be an easier way to kind of have the options presented rather than like in word form. Just be easier for people to see the overlaps.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds like a good idea.
Yeah, I might try that, screenshot it and add it to the discussion.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there anything more on that one to raise, discuss? I guess for anyone, if there's anyone watching the stream, it's not a decision that's been made yet. It's up in, like, we're discussing, we're exploring. We've not made any decisions, so don't need to worry about it being changed without good review and discussion.
And like I said, I'd definitely be against moving any of the existing releases that are out there without good reason.
Yeah, I
don't see we have that yet.
Yeah, I don't think that's on the table.
Yeah.
So, okay. Is there anything else anyone would like to raise today?
Nothing from here.
Okay, thanks, Richard. If that's all, I will stop the call and speak to you all next time.
Okay, thank you.
Bye all.
All right.